You alright?
How's your Bugatti?
Broke.
Well, snap! England's now with Bugattis.
That is, oh mate, congratulations, that is beautiful.
For sure, some guy in Australia has got 2 damaged cars. He's going to make one out of the 2, but there's a spare gearbox which...
Are you all right? How's your Bugatti? Broken. The laughter that follows tells you everything about what comes next. Glenn's reaction lands somewhere between disbelief and admiration. That is beautiful, mate. Congratulations. The story itself is simpler than it sounds, but stranger than it should be. Somewhere in Australia, a man has 2 damaged Bugattis and plans to build one functional car from the wreckage. The process leaves him with spare parts, including a gearbox. That gearbox finds its way to a buyer in Malaga, Spain, who then offers it to Mark McCann in England. Mark has already paid £900,000 for a Bugatti Veyron project, but the car arrived in pieces. The gearbox shattered. The transmission shipped to Holland, the replacement being negotiated across 3 countries. Meanwhile, Matt Armstrong paid less than Mark and received a car that actually runs. The question forming in every comment section, every community post, every reply thread is obvious. Who made the better decision? Not who got luckier. Not who spent less. Not whose thumbnail looks cleaner. Who made the smarter choice when both men stood at the same crossroads, looked at the same dream, and chose completely different paths? Stay with this because the answer is more complicated than the price difference suggests, and it will tell you something important not just about Bugattis, but about high-stakes decisions made when information is incomplete, manufacturers refuse to help, and everyone watching thinks you have lost your mind. Before comparing the decisions, you need to understand what both men actually bought, because the gap between these 2 choices is wider than the numbers suggest and narrower than the current results make it appear. The Bugatti Veyron is one of 450 built between 2005 and 2015. It was never designed as a commercial product, never intended to start a model range or capture a market segment. Volkswagen Group built it to answer a single question. Can we build a road car with 1,000 horsepower, 16 cylinders, 8 liters of displacement for turbochargers, and a top speed of 253 miles per hour? The first production car to achieve 1,000 horsepower from the factory. Ettore Bugatti himself once said of an early predecessor that it was too heavy and too ugly. The Veyron was the attempt to prove Bugatti could do what no other manufacturer had done. And it worked. For the first time in automotive history, a car you could buy from a dealer, insure, register, and drive to the shops had 1,000 horsepower. Today, those 450 cars sell for over £1.5 million each. When you can find one, Mark McCann found one. A silver Veyron with a shattered gearbox. The transmission housing cracked in 2 places. The car separated at the chassis joint. The gearbox shipped to Holland for specialist pressure testing. A potential replacement being sourced from Spain via Australia. Mark paid approximately £900,000 for a car in that condition. Matt Armstrong found one through a repossession company. Number 34 of 450. Built originally for Dubai, supposedly with enhanced cooling specifications for desert heat. Wrapped in white over what appears to be a 2-tone blue original paint. Interior in remarkable condition for a 20-year-old car. Engine running. Gearbox refused to leave the park. History is completely unknown. Matt received only the keys. Matt paid less than Mark. Exactly how much less has not been confirmed publicly, but the gap is meaningful. Same car, different stories, different prices, different problems, and a comparison that the car community is watching in real time with enormous interest because both builds are ongoing, both are unfinished, and both have produced moments that nobody expected. Start with Mark, because Mark's decision is the one that looks worse right now and deserves to be understood properly before it gets judged. Mark McCann paid approximately £900,000 for a Bugatti Veyron that arrived in 2 pieces with a shattered gearbox. On the surface, that sounds like the worst deal in the history of automotive purchases. But here is what Mark actually knew when he made that decision. He knew the damage was mechanical, visible, documented, and specific. The gearbox housing had cracked. This is a known problem with a known solution. You find a replacement gearbox. You have it pressure tested. You source the components. You rebuild. The path to completion, while long and expensive and international, is clear. There are no hidden surprises. In a cracked gearbox, you can see exactly what is wrong, and you can plan exactly what it will cost to fix. Mark also knew more about Veyrons than almost any other buyer at that price point. He had been in the Bugatti world long enough to understand what a cracked gearbox housing means and what it does not mean. It does not mean the engine is damaged. It does not mean the monocoque is compromised. It does not mean the electrical systems are corrupted or the cooling circuits are blocked or the secondary air pumps are failing. It means the gearbox housing is cracked. Expensive, yes. Solvable, absolutely. £900,000 for a Veyron needs to be understood in the context of what Veyrons actually cost. A working example in comparable specification sells for over $1.5 million. The discount Mark received for buying a project car represents two things: the cost of the repair and the premium for taking on the uncertainty. If the gearbox rebuild comes in at £150,000, which independent Veyron specialists suggest is achievable, Mark will have paid approximately $1,050,000 total for a car worth $1.5 million. That is not a bad deal. That is not a reckless decision. That is a calculated risk made by someone who understood exactly what the risk was and had the knowledge and resources to manage it. The comments laughing at Mark right now, the one saying he is seething or kicking rocks or punching air, are comparing results of two decisions without comparing the information available when each decision was made. Mark knew what he was buying. He paid accordingly. The problem is hard. The path is long, but it is not unknown. Now Matt, and this is where comparison gets genuinely uncomfortable, because the story of Matt's Veyron is not the story of a brilliant buy. Not yet. It is a story of a remarkable early result from a purchase that is still revealing what it actually contains. Matt paid less than £900,000 for a complete Veyron with a running engine and completely unknown history. That last part, unknown history, is the most important thing about this purchase. More important than the price. More important than the fuse. More important than the moment the car went into gear on a Monday afternoon in Leicester. Unknown history. Matt received only the keys with the car. No service records. No ownership history. No documentation of previous repairs. No explanation of why the finance was defaulted on. No information about where the car had been serviced, what had been done to it, or what had been done wrong. And that unknown history had already left its mark before Matt ever opened the door. Someone at some point in this car's past had looked at a blown fuse in the gearbox pump circuit and made a decision. Instead of diagnosing why the fuse was blowing, instead of following the fault, testing the pump, checking the circuit, finding the underlying cause, they fitted a larger fuse. When that blew, they fitted a larger one still. When that blew, they tried again until eventually they found a fuse rating that would hold. 40 amps in a slot designed for considerably less. That decision to upgrade the fuse rather than understand the fault generates sustained heat in the fuse housing, not the instant heat of a proper blow, which is clean and fast and leaves a clear melted wire. The slow, sustained heat of a circuit running at the edge of its capacity for extended periods. Plastic softening. Housing distorting. Adjacent fuses damaged by conducted heat. The fuse box began to fail from the inside. Matt got lucky. He got lucky because whoever fitted that 40-amp fuse had not driven the car hard enough or long enough to turn a quietly failing fuse box into something catastrophic. The car was repossessed before it burned. Matt found it before anyone else could drive it further. But here's the question that the fuse story raises. The question that nobody in the comments celebrating Matt's Halfords receipt has asked. Why was the fuse blowing in the first place? Fuses do not blow by themselves. They blow because something on the circuit is drawing more current than the circuit is rated for. The gearbox pump, a failing motor, a wiring harness is short, a pressure leak that keeps the pump running longer than it should. Something caused that original fuse to blow. Something caused a replacement to blow. And something caused the person who fitted the 40-amp fuse to need a 40-amp fuse before it stopped blowing. That something has not been found yet. The misfire remains. Multiple cylinders. Secondary air pumps not priming on ignition. A coolant leak from a radiator that has been topped up with water, not coolant, as a temporary measure. A fuse box that has taken heat damage and may need complete replacement. and somewhere in the wiring of a 20-year-old hypercar that was driven daily by an owner who eventually stopped paying the finance and let it get repossessed, possibly more. Matt's Veyron went into gear on a Monday afternoon. That is extraordinary. But the unknown history of this car is still being discovered one video at a time. Put both decisions side by side properly, not the results. The decisions. When Mark paid £900,000, he knew he was buying a car with a cracked gearbox. He could see the damage. He could plan the repair. He could estimate the cost. The unknown elements were manageable. Parts availability, repair timeline, specialist access. These are unknowns of execution, not unknowns of discovery. When Matt paid less, he was buying a car whose problems were invisible. The fuse was hidden in a wheel arch. The tampered fuse rating was buried in a fuse box under the seat. The history of who had driven this car, how hard they had driven it, what they had done to keep it running when things started going wrong. None of it was available. These are unknowns of discovery, problems that reveal themselves over time, not problems you can plan for. In risk terms, known damage is almost always preferable to unknown damage at comparable price points. You can price known damage. You cannot price unknown damage. Unknown damage is a liability with no ceiling. Mark paid a premium for known damage. Matt paid a discount for unknown damage. Both prices were rational given what each buyer knew. The result, so far, has favored Matt. One afternoon, one fuse, gearbox working. But the result is not complete. And here is the most important thing the comments comparing these two men have missed entirely. Mark's Veyron, when it is finished, will be worth more than Matt's. Not because it is a better car, not because the repair is more impressive, but because provenance matters in the hypercar market in ways that most people watching these videos on a Monday afternoon do not fully appreciate. A Veyron with documented independent rebuild, clear history of what went wrong, what was done by whom, in what order, is a car that a future buyer can understand. A Veyron with a repossession history, a tampered fuse box, an unknown previous owner who fitted wrong electrical components, and a misfire that is still being diagnosed. That is a car with a story that raises questions. And in the hypercar market, questions cost money. Mark's car will have a better story when it is finished. Matt's car will have a more dramatic story. Those are different things. And at £1.5 million, buyers pay for the better story. There's a counter-argument to everything just said, and it matters. Matt Armstrong is not buying this car to sell it. He has already said he wants to drive it to Monaco this summer. The financial analysis of resale value is largely irrelevant to a man who bought a Veyron because an impulse decision on a random Tuesday night told him this was an opportunity he could not miss. And in that context, in the context of what the car means rather than what the car is worth, Matt's decision looks very different. He paid less. He got a running car. He has a goal. Monaco, summer 2025. The problems remaining are real, but they are manageable. The fuse was not the end of the story, but it was a beginning that almost nobody expected. So who made the better decision? Here is the answer that the comments want to hear, and the answer that is actually true. They are different decisions made by different people for different reasons with different information towards different goals. Mark McCann is a buyer who wants to understand everything. He paid a premium for known damage because known damage can be planned for. His approach is methodical, expensive, international, and deliberate. When his Veyron is finished, and it will be finished, he will know that car in a way that almost no other Veyron owner in the world does. He will have sat with every major component. He will have made every critical decision about how it was put back together. He will have a car whose story is documented, verified, and clean. That knowledge and that provenance have a value that cannot be bought at any price. Matt Armstrong is a buyer who thrives in uncertainty. He has built his entire career, from a Golf GTI in a driveway to a Bugatti Veyron, in a Leicester workshop, on turning unknown risks into remarkable outcomes. The fuse is not only luck. It is a product of a methodology that Matt has refined over hundreds of projects. Follow the fault. Check the basics. Make the phone calls. Do not assume the expensive answer is the right one. And when you find a 40-amp fuse in a slot that should hold 20, do not celebrate yet. Find out why it was blowing. Both approaches work. Both have costs. Both have rewards. What neither of them did, and this is the most important thing, is what most people faced with the same decisions would have done. Most people confronted with a 900,000-pound broken Bugatti or a repossessed Veyron with unknown history would have walked away. The price is too high. The risk is too great. The knowledge required is too specialized. The manufacturer will not sell parts. The documentation does not exist. The problems are too many and too uncertain. Mark and Matt both looked at the same cars that everyone else walked away from and asked a different question. Not that this is too difficult, but what is the actual problem and can I solve it? That question, asked consistently, filmed transparently, shared with millions of people who watch every Monday to see what the answer turns out to be, is why both of them have channels that grow every week regardless of what the cars are doing. Mark's Veyron is in Holland. The gearbox is being pressure tested. The repair path is long. The bill will be significant. But the outcome is not in doubt. Matt's Veyron is in Leicester with a working gearbox, a persistent misfire, a damaged fuse box, and a coolant system that has been topped up with water. The outcome is not in doubt either. But the journey is going to produce more surprises before it's over. Two Bugattis, two decisions, two completely different paths to the same destination. And both of them together, in the same year, in the same country, with the same manufacturer, refusing to help, have proved something that Bugatti built its entire exclusivity model on preventing anyone from proving. The knowledge required to work on these cars is not exclusive. It never was. It was protected by withholding documentation, refusing part supply, and quoting repair figures that made independent work look impossible. Matt found the fault with a diagnostic tool, a phone call to Ricky at Ari Performance, and a torch pointed at a fuse box in a wheel arch. Mark found the fault by splitting the car in half and looking at what fell out. Different methods. Same conclusion. These cars are fixable by the right people with the right approach, without Bugatti's permission. Here is where both builds stand right now. Mark McCann's Veyron is making progress. The gearbox pressure testing is ongoing in Holland. A potential replacement unit is being sourced. The car is closer to completion than it was 6 months ago, and every week that passes, Mark understands it better. Matt Armstrong's Veyron went into gear on its first proper diagnosis session. The misfire is still there. The secondary air pumps are not priming correctly. The fuse that melted did so for a reason that has not yet been identified. The coolant system has a known leak, and the unknown history of this car is still being written one discovery at a time. Both are unfinished. Both are moving forward. Both are being watched by millions of people who have decided that what happens next matters to them. Not because Bugattis are rare or because the numbers are large, but because the story of two men refusing to be told something is impossible is one of the most compelling stories in automotive content right now. Who made the better decision? Mark made the safer decision. Matt made the bolder one. Mark brought certainty to the problem. Matt bought uncertainty of cost. Mark paid for a known road. Matt paid for an unknown one that turned out, so far, to be shorter than anyone expected. Both of them are going to get to the end. The question is who gets there first and what they find along the way. If you had the money, the knowledge, and the choice, Mark's 900,000-pound known problem or Matt's lower price and unknown history, which one do you take and why? Because that answer, your answer, tells more about how you think about risk than almost any other question that could be asked.